I saw some reporting, again, bad reporting this morning, that we had formally requested an extension of the ceasefire. That is not true at this moment. We remain very much engaged in these negotiations, in these talks. You heard from the Vice President directly and the President this week that these conversations are productive and ongoing, and that's where we are right now.
Let's bring in Bloomberg Horizons anchor Joumanna Bercetche live from Dubai. Joumanna, what more do we know then about a potential return to the negotiating table and maybe an extension to this deadline that was set for April the 22nd?
Yeah, that's right. Well, there's rampant reporting suggesting that the diplomatic channels are being worked very actively to make sure that the second round of negotiations does take place. We just heard from the White House press secretary over there, Karoline Leavitt, and she said that the U.S. has not formally requested an extension to the ceasefire, but our understanding is that, and this is our own Bloomberg reporting, that they are considering a 2-week extension to the ceasefire. That has not been confirmed by either side, though. However, we know that from Karoline Leavitt that if another round of discussions is held, likely venue will be Islamabad. And to that point, I would just say it's unlikely that happens in the next couple of days because the Pakistani Prime Minister is undertaking a diplomatic tour around the region. He met with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, MBS, yesterday afternoon in Jeddah. He's going to continue his travels on to Turkey and to Egypt as well. So that puts us back to perhaps April 18th. At the same time, the chief of army, the Pakistani chief of army is in Tehran. One of the key mediators, of course, reaching out to some of the Iranian negotiators on that front. And then also of note, and this was quite interesting to see, the first call has taken place between the Iranian Speaker of Parliament and the UAE Vice President yesterday. And remember, UAE obviously has received the lion's share of incoming projectiles and attacks coming through from Iran. So all of this, Tom, suggests that the diplomatic angles most definitely are being worked very aggressively in anticipation of what could be a second round of talks. But the question is whether these talks will actually yield to a longer-term cessation of hostilities or whether it's just another extension of ceasefire that is on the table, because the key crucial issues between the two sides remain, and mainly those are to do with the fate of the Strait of Hormuz, the nuclear file, and more recently, Iran had been pressing quite aggressively for war reparations and the lifting of sanctions as well.
And Joumanna, given the centrality of the Strait of Hormuz, as you say, in these negotiations, and that being a major sticking point still for these two sides, talk us through the market reaction to the developments that we've seen up until this point.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the price of oil, it's still trading $20, $25 higher than where it was before the war started. Take a look at S&P and NASDAQ, and they're at all-time highs. So equities are telling you a very different story from energy markets. And that is valid because even though the ceasefire is still being upheld, number one, we don't have a full cessation of hostilities. And number two, we do not have a full reopening of the Strait. We essentially have 2 blockades in place now. And we've been monitoring micro movements of vessels that are getting through or not getting through. But ultimately, our own reporting suggests that in the last couple of days, only about a dozen vessels have made it through the Strait. Compare that to the volume of around 100 to 150 that used to go in on a daily basis before the war even started. So for all intents and purposes, the Strait is still effectively closed. Now, we know that the U.S. has introduced this blockade as a means of extracting some of Iran's leverage out of the equation in anticipation of what could be the second round of talks. The CENTCOM, once again, asserting overnight that they have full maritime superiority over the region, that over the Strait, I should say, and that the blockade is successful. But for energy markets, unless you start to see a full unconditional rite of passage for all of those ships passing through, you're unlikely to go back to pre-war levels. And at the same time, the market is also accounting for the time it's going to take for the energy infrastructure that was damaged to get fixed. Yesterday, we heard from the Qatari finance minister in the IMF, and he was saying it's going to take months, number one, for the world to feel the full effects, the physical effects of the supply disruption. And number two, it might take years for Qatar to restore capacity to what it was before the war started. So perhaps for energy participants, they're a bit more cautious about how this is all going to play out in the coming weeks.